issues that were never fully captured till now. Past leaders and administrators may look at these costs and say, well, it's a cost of doing business. These increases clearly lay out the cost of neglect. I've just received a risk management review from the Lower Churchill project that was conducted in 2013, just after sanctioning. Emera had not even sanctioned this project at that time. When reading this with the benefit of hindsight, the precision in which the current struggles of the project are outlined is incredible, and we will share this report with you. The report clearly identifies risk, many of which the project is now realizing. It's shocking to read this report and know that the former CEO knew of these risks 4 years ago, when they could have probably mitigated against them, and the response was to do nothing. Clearly, I hope that he at least gave it to his board, or at least gave it to government. The report references contract issues, it references work delays, the possibility of protest interruptions, talks about poor engagement with Indigenous governments and organizations. It also identifies things like accommodation issues, construction type timelines, and labor availability. We face the reality that the previous government was meticulous in at least one aspect of this project, which was locking the people of the province into contracts with no flexibility and no options. What we've heard today is that these inherited issues continue to be a challenge for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. 5 years after sanctioning, we are left managing a project that was destined for cost overruns and schedule delays. Now, we take these concerns very seriously and realize that we have to get this project in the best possible position. Putting the Muskrat Falls project on a more stable footing is a priority of our government. We are also steadfast in our commitment in keeping electricity rates competitive. Our vision for the province does not include doubling of electricity rates. It may have been acceptable for the previous administration, but it's not acceptable for mine. Rates must remain competitive. Our successful negotiation of the extended federal loan guarantee will go a long way in helping the province manage the cost of the project. The benefits of the guarantee mean that the province doesn't need to put in as much equity. It gives relief and savings to potential borrowing costs of nearly $2 billion. But the agreement also addresses a number of other concerns. The cost overrun account, which alleviates significant pre-funding obligations for the province. In 2016, the government would have had to put in some $870 million into this project in the cost overrun escrow account. In 2017, it would have been responsible for another $550 million, and in 2018, another $550 million. So we've been able to negotiate changes, and the $870 million we did not have to put that in December of this year. Also, one of the conditions was a sinking fund repayment and date certainty. Under the old agreement, the province would have had to begin repayment on its loans in 2018. Those changes have been made. Given that the project schedule has changed, we have negotiated date changes in the agreement, which saves the province from having to make loan repayment before the project is complete. This agreement is critical in improving our ability to reduce future electricity rates once the project comes online. The additional loan guarantee also complements the $210 million that we've allocated in this year's budget to bring electricity rates down beginning in 2020, 2021. And in subsequent years, you will see a forecast of some $245 million in the out years. We have also committed to undertaking future work to define mitigation actions that protect your rates. And we will continue to work with Mr. Marshall and his team at Nalcor Energy to identify opportunities to bring greater accountability and oversight to this project for the benefits of our residents. As Premier, I fully appreciate the difficult tasks that Mr. Marshall and the newly appointed Board of Directors have in front of them. We will continue to have engagement and dialogue with our Indigenous leaders. We as a government have invested a lot of time and resources into correcting the course of this project. We've been making strides, and we will continue to look into the future of what the Muskrat Falls project will mean to the people of our province in 2 years, in 5 years, and in 20 years. So I now invite Minister Coady to address the room.
Thank you, Premier. This morning, Nalcor CEO Stan Marshall shared new project baseline information regarding the Muskrat Falls project. Originally sold to the people of the province as a $6.2 billion project, we now know it will cost $10.1 plus financing. Literally billions of dollars in inherited problems due to the former government's lack of controls and abysmal understanding of fiscal and project management. As the Premier indicated, we now have a 2013 risk assessment report which is being given to you, which foreshadows exactly the predicament we now find ourselves in, now as a province and as a people. The report identifies numerous serious issues around the project. This is going back to 2013, around the powerhouse construction, around early work delays, the concerns of the Indigenous peoples, cost overages, and controlled issues. As the Premier indicated, we've always questioned this project. The galling thing is there were severe risks identified that were either simply ignored, not addressed, or even assigned any credibility for that matter, and we understand they would not even accept the report. Shame on them. The former government's poor assumptions, lack of controls, dismal knowledge of project management, and complete lack of understanding of the energy marketplace has led us to where we are today. However, despite the fact that we inherited a very difficult situation, we are working diligently and methodically to get the project under control. One of our goals on coming into office was to determine the cost, schedule, and associated risks of the Muskrat Falls project. And we have done just that. We accepted all of EY's recommendations to ensure better controls of the project. We appointed a credible, world-renowned CEO, Stan Marshall, who's been cleaning up the project and putting it on a stronger foundation. He said he's never worked as hard in his life, and we thank him for it. We appointed a highly qualified members to a new expanded board of directors at Nalcor, including new chair, global business leader Brendan Paddock. This board was appointed based on a list of recommendations provided by the Independent Appointments Commission. And we expanded the Muskrat Falls Oversight Committee to include the appointment of new independent members who've come with a wealth of knowledge and experience in such things as engineering, economics, corporate governance, finance, and business management. The result is better management, better controls, and better outcomes. 75% of construction is complete, up from 48% last year. That's a 27% increase in just 1 year. Transmission line between Churchill Falls and Muskrat Falls is now 95% complete. The Labrador Island transmission link from Muskrat Falls to the Avalon Peninsula is 81% complete, up from 43% this time last year. As a government, we have consistently questioned the decision-making process of the previous administration on this project. Knowing why decisions were made as they were, what assumptions were used to justify the project, and why costs were not accurate must be clearly understood so that we never find ourselves in this position again in this province. Someone must be held accountable. Our commitment to you is to ensure the best controls are in place for this project and to work to manage electricity rate increases associated with the poor decisions made by the PCs to do this project in the first place. Thank you.
Said someone must be held accountable, so does that mean there will be a forensic audit or a public inquiry?
Michael, the easiest thing for a politician, especially someone like me who's spoken out loudly about this project for many years, the easiest thing right now, it's kind of political goal and opportunity really to call a forensic audit or even inquiry at this stage. But that would be clearly political. This project started on politics. Right now, I've spoken to the CEO, I've spoken to the AG and so on. It would be a very exhaustive review, would take a lot of time, a lot of resources. The last thing we want to do is disrupt this project. We need Nalcor and their team to be completely focused with discipline on getting this project to a strong finish. That's what we need. If we slow this project down, even though it might be good politics, because the inquiry or the forensic audit would tell you what we already know. What we already know. It was started on bad assumptions. It might give us the opportunity for me to say, I told you so, and others to say, I told you so, but it would slow the project down. Anytime you slow this project down, all Newfoundland and Labrador pays because they pay with higher rates. We already know with schedule delays, once we lose schedule, it means higher costs, therefore higher rates. So even though it's good politics, it's not really good for the project. So it's not a matter of if I do this, we will, but it's just a matter of when it needs to be done. We need an in-depth look at this. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it should be done.
So
and now it's not the right time.
So when is the right time?
Well, I think the project needs to be concluded, and I think what happens, I'll put our record, and I think Stan Marshall will put his record on what we took over in 2015 and how we finished strong on what happened pre-2015. And people, they need to be held accountable for this. I will assure you that this project was based on a bunch of poor assumptions.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to hold somebody accountable if it's all agreed that it was poor assumptions? Who's going to be held accountable?
Well, someone else will determine who's held accountable here. You need those forensic audits, or you need those reviews, those very intensive reviews done. And that's how the accountability, when you understand the degree of the accountability, what went wrong, what lessons we learned from this. This impacts future developments in our province as well. And so we need to do this analysis on whatever it will be, and then that's where the accountability will be determined at this point.
When you see this document, which is being delivered to you now, it's a risk assessment done in 2013, so the project was only months old. Could have been, they could have paused, they could have stopped, they could have changed, they could have ensured the risks were thoroughly analyzed and mitigated. When you see this report, you'll question why we are in the situation we are in today. It foreshadows, as I said, everything that has happened today.
Why is this being released now? Why didn't you release it before now?
I just got this just this week. Matter of fact, just yesterday, this report was given to me. We had heard of a number of reports that might have been done, but we were just able to get our hands on this yesterday.
So why did you ask for it, or why?
Well, because as I said, we had heard that there were examples and reports that would have been done, and so we went looking for it, and we actually found the report yesterday.
So you didn't look at this report prior to yesterday?
I got this report yesterday.
And it tells the impacts of the project?
Tells what the risk assessment was, and it actually foreshadows, as Siobahn said, it foreshadows some of the things that we are seeing coming to fruition today. None of this are surprises. The only person here, I mean, I am surprised with the number today, but I can assure you former premiers and the former CEOs and probably former board members will not be surprised with any of this because they would have known this. And in a lot of cases, the information is in there. Many people would have articulated in the beginning of this project. I mean, we know that it doesn't speak to demand and so on, but we know the assumptions that this project was based on in terms of where it was, the conditions, the environment. It even identifies some of the things like a cofferdam. So there's a lot of information out there. There was a lot of work that went into this. And the responsibility of those that completed this report felt it was their responsibility to let Nalcor know this.
So were we lied to?
Someone else will be determined who was lied to, whether it was intentional or deliberate or if it indeed was a lie. But what I know is that the information that this project is started on, there were risks identified very early on in this project as early as April of 2013. So risk identified as early as April 2013 of things that we're seeing come to fruition today. So there was a lot of foreshadowing, but they were actually projecting of what could go wrong with this project. And when you look at this report, you will see that, you know, they have identified the risk that we are dealing with and that, you know, the CEO, Stan Marshall, is dealing with today.
So what exactly happened to this report back then? It was just buried? It wasn't.
You know, Michael, obviously
We don't know.
it predates me. I have no idea, but I mean, there's a lot of information that you know, that you get from people that will come up and mention things to you and so on. But you know, the fact is that the report exists. We were able to get, you know, hands on a copy of it, and I think it really foreshadows, as I said, of many of the things that we're dealing with today. So no surprises to the people, I think, that would have been around the project in early days. Some of the comments that are made here and some of the risks that have been identified.
The question does come to, I believe, what was done with this report? Did anyone action this report? We understand that there, you know, we are where we are today, but did someone action this report? Did they consider the severe risks that this report outlines? Certainly, it doesn't appear that there's been that was done. So there are a lot of questions around what has been done in the past. What are the assumptions around the cost and the schedule and how we got to where we are today? But as I said earlier, it's certainly our responsibility and our task to make sure that we put this project under better control, and we've done just that in the last year to 18 months.
So Minister, was this report with your office before yesterday?
No, it was not.
And where did you get this report?
I got this report. The CEO Marshall gave me this report. It came from SNC.
Okay, and when did he get it from SNC?
He's had this report, and we were chatting about this week. We decided that I got my hands on it yesterday and got it released.
Did you ask him when he got it?
Pardon me?
Did you ask Mr. Marshall?
No, I didn't ask him, because everything that you see in this report are really things that are in the past, things that we're actually dealing with right now. And
You
so,
mentioned people working on the project wouldn't be surprised. A lot of these people are working for you
No,
now.
not-
So is it not a surprise to you that this is only coming to light now?
we put I don't know who the former CEO would have shared it with. It is my understanding that he didn't share it with the upper management, so I would imagine he shared it with his board at least. This is the same board that resigned en masse, remember, in support of him, so I would imagine that he shared it with them. But I don't know these answers. I wasn't there, but what was important for us to know is that we had the report, so wanted to put it out there, and just to make sure that, because it really identified a lot of things that we're actually dealing with today, so it was important, you know, for us to get that out there.
And to clarify your position, you're saying that when the project is concluded, that there will be
Yeah, look,
for whoever would be the government at the time, whether you or someone else?
Absolutely. In my view right now, this needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And, you know, clearly, for political reasons, it would be very easy for me to do this right now. It would be extremely easy for me to do this right now. Lots of people have reached out to me almost on a daily basis that we need to do a forensic audit. We need to do, you know, get the AG in there, do an in-depth, you know, analysis, a review of what's being done, you know, anything from an inquiry for that matter. I've heard many of those options. But you know what I do know is, even though it would be a very good political opportunity, it is really not good for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians when it comes to rates.
But we're not talking a particularly long timeline either. You have an oversight committee that does basic review work right now. Would it not be possible to start talking about the format that this
When
what would be looked at?
when I did ask those questions, the AG, as an example, who told me that we've had justice take a look at all of this as well. They said this would be a very long, intensive inquiry. The AG said we've never done anything like this before, as an example, and we've heard timelines of, you know, almost 2 years as an example of getting this done. We know the Cameron inquiry took up a lot of resources, a lot of time. The key, though, is even though it's for all the right political reasons to do it, for the project itself to cause those kinds of disruptions will lead to further delays. I think the CEO Marshall mentioned this morning. I've mentioned this to the board. I've talked to the AG, talked to the Department of Justice, and so on. There is, in their view, in everyone's view, the advice that I've been given, it certainly would lead to delays. Anytime we delay this project, it opens us and exposes us to more claims, more risk, and increased in rates.
So the forensic audit will happen potentially in 2 or 3 years' time, or will start in 2 or 3 years' time.
the minister just said there needs to be accountability. How are we gonna have accountability between now and then?
Well, I think we put in a tremendous amount of accountability. Number one, the oversight committee itself has now 4 independent members on it. We have a new board there that was appointed by the IAC. These are members that are actively, working quite hard right now in accountability. We have a new CEO in place as an example. So we put in a number of measures already to increase the accountability on this project.
So I'm going to just say there's a difference between making sure you're controlling what you're doing today and doing the best you can to get this project finished as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And all the things that I outlined really do give you assurance that that there are controls in place. What we all want as the people of this province is to understand how we got here to begin with. What were the assumptions used? Why did they use that? You heard Mr. Marshall talk this morning about, the assumptions around rates going up versus going down, the usage of electricity going up versus going down. All those things have to be questioned. Why those decisions were made the way they were and how we got to where we are must be reviewed, in my opinion. It's just a matter, as the Premier said, of when you review them. We don't want any more problems with the project in making and driving costs for the people of this province.
I mean, let's once again repeat, what Siobahn had said a few minutes ago. Prior to June of 2016, this project was 48% complete. In the last year, 1 year alone, it's now an extra 27% complete. So prior to June of 2016, 48% complete. When you go from June of 2016 to June of 2017, it's now 75% complete. That's a 27% increase in just 1 year. That's making progress. And I do not want to stall the progress and the momentum, that the CEO, Stan Marshall, and the board is actually doing on that project right now. That's important, because if we slow it down, the only people that are paying will be the Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and they'll be paying that with rates.
Premier, when you referred earlier to the former head of Nalcor, so did you mean to suggest that Ed Martin should have known, or that he did know but just didn't do enough? What were you trying to say there?
Well, I think the former CEO had this report that we're talking about now, and maybe other reports. I don't know, what he would have had, but it'd be interesting to know if he shared this report with anyone, who he shared it with, and why is it that this report, something that is actually forecasting the very same things that we're dealing with today, cost overruns, loss of schedule, all those sorts of things that we are dealing with. Why is it that a report like this was not publicly available? Why is it the report was ignored?
Yeah.
Why was it that it was neglected? Because keep in mind back in those days, we were told that there's so much pre-planning, so much pre-engineering gone into this project. Remember all this language? Remember all of that? The pre-planning that was done, the pre-engineering. Matter of fact, we were told at one point that I don't see this project going over budget. Maybe we might at some point even get it below budget, as an example.
Well, this report doesn't say that.
Just for a quick follow-up, so, when you look back at this, given where we're at now, is there anything you can see that's obvious that could have been done back in 2013 to save some of where this went?
The obvious things have led to cost overruns and schedule delays. This is what we're dealing with, and this is mentioned in this report.
Yeah,
It was really based on, clearly what this report will tell you, that it was really based on poor assumptions.
Yeah.
And as Stan mentioned this morning, that the numbers were low. The numbers were just, the assumptions were wrong. They were low. So not just the assumptions on the construction. It doesn't speak to, we already know today that the demand assumptions were miscalculated, were wrong. We also know that the price of oil, of course, for a number of different reasons, that didn't materialize either. But clearly it was based on the fact that the electricity rates would not go down anywhere in the world. It's quite the opposite of what happened in the Upper Churchill, as an example. Electricity rates would never go down. They will always continue to go up. I could clearly say that based on their assumptions, the only people in this country will be seeing higher electricity rates, especially in Atlantic Canada, will be Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
Is this not a breach of trust?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm pretty busy these days trying to clean up a mess that we've been dealt with. I think that's been pretty obvious. But people will call it what they want. We're going to do what we've got to do to get this project back on track. I think we've made significant progress, and it should not be lost. And today's a difficult day. But it should not be lost on us that as a government, we've made significant momentum in this province in getting our financial house in order. We've been able to get some significant projects across the finish line. We're making a difference in many projects in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. We're making big investments in tourism as an example. So even though today, you get a little upset with this news, there's still a lot of great things going on in this province as well, and we're getting some momentum, and we're not going to let a day like today stall our momentum.
So you don't wanna say whether it was breach of trust, or do you not have an opinion on it?
Look, I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer. Right now, I'm very busy being a premier, and I've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to continue to do what I can do to make sure that Newfoundland and Labrador is a better place to live. And this project gets across the finish line with a very strong finish. That's our objective right now. And right now, in the last year, there's been a lot of work that's been done, a lot of great progress that's been done. And, our objective here is to have a very strong finish.
You're not a judge or a lawyer, but there are plenty of lawyers that work within the government. You mentioned consulting with them yourself. So have they given you any advice specific to timetables around even legal accountability and investigation in that regard? Are there any limitations that might come into play if we delay our investigation by 2 or 3 years?
I haven't gotten into those kinds of questions.
Shouldn't it be something that you're looking at, though?
We'll let the Justice Department, they've taken a look at this, they can respond on that. And like I said, we just got this yesterday, and first time I read it was yesterday myself. So these are all very good questions, very good questions. I think there'll be a lot of discussion and debate in coffee shops and over the weekend and so on, so, we'll get those answers. As I said, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, and, the impact of doing it right now, the impact that it would have on the project.
I wanted to ask you, a year ago, I asked you about rate mitigation and what you might be doing within your, as lead minister in your department, to look at that, to address that. You weren't really sure what would happen then. Do you have any ideas now what might be happening?
Well, we've directed Nalcor to give us a suite, I'll call it that, of options of how we can mitigate rates. We know that we've put into our later forecast when the project comes on in 2020. We've put into our budget assumptions 210 million and going to 245 million to mitigate to rate manage, because we know, as the Premier said, that rates are going up significantly. So we have to manage those rates and ensure we are competitive. You've heard Stan Marshall, CEO of Nalcor, give a couple of things that we can do. We've already said about export power sales. We've already talked about early use of the transmission lines that will come into play in 2018. We're making big progress in bringing those transmission lines in earlier, so we might be able to not use Holyrood, which is a tremendous cost, of course, because of use of diesel electricity, also has climate change impacts, but costs of Holyrood. So we'll be able to have a pot of fund then to mitigate rates. Those are some of the early thoughts that we're working with, but as we move forward, we'll have more options available to us. But we do know the federal loan guarantee, for example, helps us mitigate rates as well.
Yeah, but it is going to be a public policy decision, and it's going to have to come from, I would think, outside of Nalcor, in terms of a lot of the things you're mentioning. It's 1 and 2 cents at a time. We're talking about a much more significant increase than that. So within government, is this actually a conversation that you've started yet?
Absolutely, we've started. That's why it's in the budget. We have started these conversations. We are working with Nalcor. As you said, it's a public policy decision. Mr. Marshall mentioned that this morning. Public policy decisions on how you capture, for example, any savings that you may have with the transmission lines. How do you capture that? How do you disperse that? So those are public policy decisions that are being worked through. Looking at legislation. How do we do that? Working with the parameters that we have. So that's why we've taken this early stage. We started this late last year. We started this so that we will be in a position to manage rates that we know are going up, to manage those rates come the time of Muskrat Falls Power.
Isn't any money, though, that goes towards rate mitigation money that the government won't have to spend on things like building roads or any of the other things that the government does?
The source of revenue is, if you want rate mitigation so that, obviously people in our province are, will at least be able to live, in comfort. I mean, we had to be competitive. That was the reason why we signaled quite early about what we would be doing in 2021, as an example, with some $210 million and $245 million in the out years. So it was important to do that. This is a situation that we're into, And, you know, we've got 3 years now to actually deal with rate mitigation, working very closely with Nalcor. I think the CEO, Marshall, mentioned that, you know, this morning. But you're right, there is a pot of money, and there is money available. In the past, if you listen to the Tory plan here, they had Nalcor being their legacy project. Instead of producing a legacy fund, they had a legacy project. Well, they got a legacy project. There's no doubt about that. They've been able to establish that, but not the one that they anticipated it would be.
With where we are today, with Muskrat Falls, this is phase 1 of the Lower Churchill project. Mr. Premier, would you sanction Gull Island?
You know, we had, obviously this came up earlier this week when I spoke to a group of leaders that were in the province. You know, we have tremendous assets, not just Gull Island in our province. We have wind, as an example, as assets, and we know that there are some options or some opportunities, I should say, you know, with good, clean energy, but certainly not anything on the backs of the ratepayers of our province. That's the difference there. You know, there's a lesson to be learned that, you know, if you're an oil executive, you shouldn't be building hydro dams.
Yeah.
And so right now, we would see any future development of Gull Island, number one, first and foremost, Indigenous engagement. They would have to be consulted in a meaningful way, part of the project. Could never go ahead without that. We would also make sure that it's not on the backs of ratepayers in this province. So these are assets, no discussions are ongoing right now, none at all. There's none planned. Our priority is getting Muskrat Falls completed right now. If there's any future opportunities that will come with developing natural resources, if we can attract business to this province by those developments, well, that would be, you know, my recommendation and the advice that I would give. But, you know, we're hoping to exploring what options we have available to us. As been mentioned already, we need to generate employment, we need to create jobs, and we need to make sure that we have good, sound sources of revenue that are not on the backs of the ratepayers in this province.
Just in terms of going forward, how concerned are you that costs could go up again?
We're getting closer to the finish line. 75% complete, 25% left.
Do you have some lawsuits though thrown in there?
Well, we've made provision for a lot of those lawsuits too, and we've actually been able to put in place and actually solve many of those lawsuits as well. You know, the Estali contract now is in a better place. Lawsuits beyond those. Vallard in a better place. Lawsuits behind them. There's another.
Mud Lake.
You know, all those issues, and these are still risk. Anytime you have a major construction site, there will always be risk, but there are only so many that you can actually say. The ones that you know that you're going to have to deal with at some point, and I think Stan did a good job explaining that this morning. You can you can put in what you think will be risk and around contracts and so on. But any time you have a major project like to the magnitude of Muskrat Falls in this environment, you know, there's always risk.
Mr. Marshall said this is worse than the Upper Churchill. What do you think?
It's worse than the Upper Churchill.
Certainly.
In the Upper Churchill, there's one clear difference. The ratepayers in Newfoundland and Labrador are not paying for it. At least some point, we will get it back in 2041, and there will be revenue that will be generated from this. From this project right here, it's clearly on the backs of ratepayers. So when I compare the two, from the chair that I sit in, there was a lost opportunity with the Upper Churchill contract, and strictly around escalation. But when I look at the Muskrat Falls project, you know, clearly this is having a significant impact on ratepayers and indeed the finances of this province. So when I compare the two, ratepayers are paying for one, the other one was a missed opportunity in some extra revenue.
Joey Smallwood has a legacy. Do you think this is Danny Williams' legacy?
You know, I'm not here to give a report card on former premiers. All I know that I said it in 2012, and I say it today, I would never start at this project.
Didn't you vote for it?
Pardon me?
Didn't you vote for it?
No. We led the filibuster on this.
Premier, I just have one other question, and it has to do with the tragic, what happened, the accident Monday.
Terrible.
It's now Friday, and we basically, neither Hydro nor Nalcor has said, you know, given any indication of what happened. We know a tower fell, but I think there's a lot of people out there wondering just a little bit of information.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, we need information on this, and clearly the reports, as was mentioned this morning, I have not seen the reports yet. You know, we need those reports, and you know, you know, worker safety is paramount in all of this, and we need the investigation so we can prevent this from ever happening again. We have young man here, we have colleagues, there's work to be done. We want to make sure that people work in a safe environment, so we need to get those reports back.
When we might know just even a little bit?
I don't have the dates. I mean, right now, I'd love to have them today, to be honest with you. I'd love to have those as quickly as possible. It takes some time.
So I'm sure you must know what happened.
You know, I don't know what happened. You know, I clearly don't know what happened here. I would be just speculating, and so I really don't know, and I'll wait for those reports to actually tell us, you know, and inform us on what happened. And I hope clearly there's some recommendations that could come out of this that will actually specify that exactly what happened, so we can prevent it from happening again. But our thoughts are with those families and their colleagues, their co-workers. You know, these were tragedies, you know, on this transmission line.
Speaking of reports, the Auditor General released their annual report today. Can you shift gears for just a second? One of the things talking about is road work and political influence for road work. In 2015, 2016, they said 43% had there was MHA influence in road work. What has been done, or what is being done, or what is your reaction to that?
I haven't read the report, but I will tell you that, you know, we put in place for the first time in the history of this province a 5-year road program. So I haven't seen the report yet. We've been a little busy. But there's been a 5-year roads program that's been put in place. And it was the first time in history that we've been able to do that. We've been doing this with, you know, with work of engineers, you know, from Transportation Works, who are independent of MHA decisions. So they made those sections of roads a priority. No other government has done that in their history, none whatsoever. And the industry association themselves, this was something that they applauded. So like I said, when I get a chance to read the report over the weekend, hopefully, and I know the various departments and ministers are in a position now to respond to those reports. But first time in our history, we've had a 5-year roads program in place, and the industry enjoys it and are proud of it, and it actually sends a message to the communities that are impacted by this, because it's built around, you know, economic development and the conditions of the road and so on. So that's the way those decisions have been made.
The report also says that government is not positioned to be prepared for the demographic wave, the aging population. We're not in a good position.
Yeah, and with the Atlantic Growth Strategy, we put a big focus on immigration, as an example, attracting people to our province. We set what I believe will be historic numbers just last year of people that have been attracted to Newfoundland and Labrador as a place to live. So we must continue to use our educational institutions and so on. I mean, it's a great place to live. We all know that, and there's a lot of opportunities in our province, and it's an attractive place for people to come to live. And we have put in place a more aggressive immigration program, and working with our Atlantic colleagues, our 4 premiers right now, we've been working very closely on this initiative. It's part of the Atlantic Growth Strategy, and it's really been not a year since this strategy has been endorsed. So we recognize this as in terms of population, and something that we must attract immigrants, as an example, to supply, number one, the labor force, and just increase our population.
I just wanted to bring it back to Muskrat for just 1 minute for a quick point of clarification. When you talk about the end of the project, are you thinking about the first power, full power, when all the bills are paid? When exactly is that point coming?
Yeah, I think we'll be when we're in a position, you know, that we can do this as quickly as possible. I said, is it the last day when people pack up their belongings and accommodations and leave? Is that the last day? You know, when we get to a position when we're not disrupting the project, that's when we need to get these audits or these inquiries, whatever the process would be. This is when we need to be able to do that. We do not want. The only reason why we're not doing this now would be we know that this would be a disruption to the project.
So you'll take your cue from Mr. Marshall?
We'll work with, you know, Mr. Marshall and others that will be involved in this, I'm sure, along the way. The key thing, though, Ashley, in all of this is not causing disruptions, which would cause for further delays. And like I said, politically, I'm sure there's premiers or politicians would look at this and just bat it out of the park and say, let's do this right now. And but that's not who I am. It's not worth it. With
due respect, though, Mr. Premier, I think what most people in the province right now are looking for is something a little more firm. So can you be a little more firm in terms of when this will happen?
Ashley, if I put a number out there right now, is It would be a guess. It would be a guess. But we need to get to a place when we are not disrupting the project. As I said, ideally, we need the individuals that are working on this project focusing on getting it finished, getting it completed in the most cost-effective, timely way possible. I'm not interested in using a political opportunity to increase the rates of this province.
Well said.
No interest in me doing that at all. None whatsoever.
Well said.